and folks can just do a short introduction. I don't think we have any new people here today. Or maybe we do. Marco? Marco new?
Hello?
Hello.
What? I just heard my name. Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, I was going to have everyone introduce themselves, and I was going to say we could do the shortened one because I don't see anyone new, but I don't think you've been with us before, Marco. So why don't we do... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I was invited by Veronica from Satul. I'm Marco Hernandez. I use he they pronouns, and I'm the public policy director for Tending the Soil, which includes Satul, a Wood Center, Inquilinos Unidos, the New Justice Project, Unidos Minnesota, and SEIU Local 26.
Great, thank you. So welcome. So now I'll just run through the committee members' names here, and if everyone can just do a very short introduction. Anna?
Hey, my name is Anna. I am the community manager at Fair State Brewing Cooperative in Northeast Minneapolis.
Ashley?
Hi, I'm Ashley Bone. I'm here with the City of Minneapolis Civil Rights Department.
Lucas?
Yeah, hi everybody. Lucas Franco with the Laborers Union, research manager from Minnesota and North Dakota.
Madeline?
Hi, I'm Madeline Lohman. I'm a senior researcher with the Advocates for Human Rights.
Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Maxwell. I'm the AFSCME Local 9 president, which represents 800 workers in Minneapolis. I work for the city of Minneapolis as a fire inspector, and I am a resident of the city of Minneapolis.
Wade?
Yeah, hi everyone. Wade Luneberg with Unite here, Minnesota's Hospitality Union.
Brian W.
Brian, City of Minneapolis, Department of Civil Rights.
And I have a phone number ending in 27. I have a phone number ending in 27. Is that Kate Davenport maybe? She kind of joins by phone.
That's not my phone number, but I
never mind. Oh, you're on here. Oh, yeah, Kate. Go ahead, Kate.
I'm on here.
Sorry,
I just go ahead and say.
Go ahead, Kate.
Sorry.
Oh. Phone number
Kate
ending
from you. Should I go or I'll go, Chelsea. Kate Davenport, co-president of Eureka Recycling and also member of Main Street Alliance.
Thank you. The phone number ending in 27 now.
Sorry, I was struggling to unmute myself. My name is Lauren. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm with Documenters Minnesota, and I'm just here to note take on today's meeting.
Thank you. Elise?
Oh my gosh, sorry. I just couldn't get up that mute button. Sorry, I'm a bit late. Elise Diedrich with Target. Thank you.
Yasmin?
Hello, my name is Yasmin. I'm a policy aide for Councilmember Aisha Chukdai.
Thank you. And as people came into the room, it screwed up my order here. So did I miss anybody else? All right, seeing none, I'll just highlight that the main topic today is the update that we requested a few months ago on the co-enforcement model with the city. So there are plenty of other things on the agenda. And I've asked Brian if he's willing to help me facilitate this afternoon. So do you mind if I just kind of hand it over to you, Brian Walsh?
Yeah.
And I'll be here, but just there's a few things going on around me. So.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for being here. We have what a great turnout and mix of people today. I'm excited for our meeting today, and especially the presentation. I was going to say the only person we're really missing is Veronica, and here she is. So, Veronica, do you want to real quick just introduce yourself? We just went around and did introductions.
Oh, yes. Hi, I'm Veronica Mendez-Moore, co-director of Satul.
All right. I'm going to just glance at the agenda to make sure I'm not missing anything. The first thing that we have listed is me on LSAT update. I do have a few exciting settlements to share with everyone, but I think I'm going to actually talk about those next month. I kind of want to save time in this meeting for other things on the agenda. The next thing listed is the committee member updates. We usually just go around, and anyone who has anything that they want to share for the good of the group about what their organization is up to right now is free to do so. Does anyone have anything they want to share? You certainly don't have to, but we would love to hear it.
I'll just say that obviously from our point of view, from our perspective, we're spending a lot of time working on different strike actions happening throughout our community. So obviously the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers are now in their second week. So a lot of community support happening, both for the educators and the folk and the families in our communities.
Yep. Thanks so much for mentioning that, Chelsea. All right. We have a few other things to kind of circle back on and discuss that we have touched on in previous meetings, but I think, Veronica, do you want to go ahead and dive into your presentation, or would you like me to maybe cover some of these other things first? We can do either way.
I'm happy to do either way. I was told that I would start at 4:15.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so I invited some folks to come at 4:15.
Yeah.
But I think I see most of them on here, so I don't know if there's something.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I should remember that. Let's cover a couple of these other things. Why don't we jump down to the new business actually? And I wonder, Madeline, is there anything you could update folks on either the Hennepin County, Ramsey County Attorney's Office's wage theft roundtable that we've been that I know has been ongoing for a while, and maybe if you have an update regarding that, and or I think some really exciting news about the labor trafficking statute amendment working its way through the Capitol.
Yeah, so the Labor Advisory Council is still meeting. They have been trying to figure out how to best get investigations going, and have come up with a sort of priority list for law enforcement of what they think their focus is going to be for wage theft cases, basically, so that civil enforcement and community organizations know how to do those referrals. They also asked some of the community organizations and unions to put together a how to work with witnesses guide, basically, that one of the difficulties of wage theft is that you need someone who's willing to testify about the fact that their wages were stolen. And that can be a really difficult ask, especially since it's a contrast with civil enforcement where the worker doesn't necessarily need to say anything publicly in a court. And so they wanted to know what were the best ways to work with people to help them play that role. So we put some stuff together that addresses both what community organizations can do, but also I think just as important what law enforcement needs to do to make sure that they're communicating correctly and what prosecutors can do, because that is really the missing piece. And so we submitted that to the Labor Advisory Council. I think Merle really took the lead in spearheading that, and Dan helped get it all together. So that has gone into them. I'm not totally sure what it's going to turn into, partly because I'm not totally sure what the outcomes are of the Labor Advisory Council. It's a little nebulous. And then one thing that did come out of that is that we, Susan Crum, the Hennepin County attorney who prosecuted the Botchwitz case, and I were asked to write a revision to the state labor trafficking statute, which we did. That had a hearing in the House last week. Representative Feist is the author of it. The current plan is to lay it over for inclusion in the omnibus bill. We are seeking a Senate author to introduce and maybe have a hearing in the Senate as well, but that is still sort of being dealt with now. So we do, I think I circulated the draft legislation to the committee. If anyone has any comments, we have this big window before they start pulling together the omnibus bill, and we already have changes that we are intending to make based on feedback we've gotten from other people. So it's certainly not too late if there's something that you see that you're like, oh, I would use different wording, or can you clarify why this change is being made? Happy to talk through any of that with anybody. So feel free to take a look at that and let me know. But it's basically just trying to make everything plain English as much as you can in a law, and to expand the kinds of behaviors that are captured by the labor trafficking statute, so that it's not quite so narrow. Right now, it really focuses on bodily harm. And so we expanded that to include economic, reputational, and psychological harm, as well as aggressive sexual contact. And we also defined abuse of the legal process, which doesn't really mean anything in Minnesota law, so that it's clear it's using any kind of administrative, civil, or criminal enforcement process to pressure someone into doing work for you. So I think it's going to be clearer and more usable, and there may still be even further improvements. So definitely reach out if anyone wants more information or wants to give me edits.
I have a couple of quick follow-up questions. I'm not sure if anyone else does. Is that task force I don't know what the name of it is, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office Wage Theft Task Force? Does that work? Is that still meeting? Is it sort of open-ended, or is there like a tight sort of timeline and set up? Okay.
I think it's still meeting. We had a meeting, and then they made it sound as if we were going to have another meeting. Basically, Mike Freeman said, you know, we stop meeting when we stop achieving things, essentially. And so I think we're still getting stuff done, and so still meeting, but I'm not totally clear on what they will consider like having finished what we're doing. So.
And my second,
we'll see.
We'll see. That's fair. That actually makes perfect sense somehow. And I apologize if I missed this earlier, or maybe at a different meeting. Where are they at with sort of the discussion of what agency or how to do criminal investigation, and or how to better coordinate between different agencies, or across the sort of civil and criminal divide?
So they created a guide to sort of the handoff process between civil and criminal agencies. It's essentially a prioritization of like what kinds of cases civil agencies should consider for criminal removal. So like, do you have witnesses who are willing to testify? Is there a significant risk to public safety? Were a large number of people affected? Were the dollar values particularly high? Does it reflect a systemic issue? Those kinds of things are like, then we consider doing the handoff and the coordination. Ramsey County has hired in their attorney's office an investigator to do wage theft cases. So in Ramsey County, that person will end up being the lead. I don't believe there's a comparable person in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, and the Sheriff's Office is still sort of a mess in Hennepin County. So
that's not the answer I was hoping to hear.
Yeah, so I don't totally know there. I'll do a little more. I mean, I'll update if we get anything more. I think that's sort of what they're waiting to announce as the accomplishment, is like, here's the directives for what you should send us. Here's the person you call, and then we've done it. That's our role. And I think, you know, until that investigator in Ramsey County starts taking cases, I don't think they know how a joint investigation is going to work or look.
Yep.
But I know it's something that they're trying to figure out. So I don't know that the document yet on the process is ready for public circulation. Veronica, has Merle said anything? No. Okay. So the whole thing is a very confusing mix of like things are happening, but it's not really clear what the end goal or the public outcome will be. So I'll let you more updates to come.
Fits and starts. We'll look forward to more updates. Does anyone else have any questions about all of that for Madeline before we move on? All right, Veronica, I think in a moment we can pass it off to you for a presentation or update overview of our collaborative co-enforcement. But before we do that, I think we were joined by a couple of distinguished guests in the city. Maybe I just allow anyone else who joined a little bit late. Thanks for being here. Does anyone want to just real quick introduce themselves? Including May. May, we did introductions. You want to do a quick intro?
Hi there, people. I am May Brooks. I work at the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board.
I'm happy to jump in. Hi, everyone. I'm Aisha Chugtai. I represent Ward 10 on the Minneapolis City Council.
And hi, everyone. I'm Jason Chavez. I represent the 9th Ward on the Minneapolis City Council.
Well, thanks everyone so much for being here. And I believe, Veronica, you can take it away.
Great, thank you. So I'll get started and then in a minute I will attempt my technology to share my screen with you. So we'll see how that goes. But for now, just wanted to introduce myself. Veronica Mendez-Moore, she, her pronouns. I'm the co-director of Satul for the last 15 years. I've been on the WAC for several years, and in partnership with the Labor Standards Enforcement Division, partnering to ensure effective compliance through developing a co-enforcement model, which is what I'm going to talk about now. We've been doing that for about 5 years. So just quickly, so my presentation, I want to talk really briefly about like this table, the Workplace Advisory Committee and how it relates to co-enforcement. And then I'm going to go into a little more depth about wage theft, and then mostly focus on what is a co-enforcement model, and specifically like what does that look like here in this context, because we're not the only, Minneapolis is not the only place to have a co-enforcement model like this. So that's what we'll do. And if people have any clarifying questions, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, we'll have time at the end for bigger questions. Okay, so quick history. So in the time that the Workplace Advisory Committee has existed, and including its sort of previous configuration that came up during when we were making recommendations for earned sick and safe time ordinance, this group has made lots of recommendations on ordinances that expand the rights of workers in Minneapolis. And so that has resulted in passing the earned sick and safe time ordinance, the increase to the minimum wage ordinance, specifics around wage theft protection to protect workers from wage theft, and the freelance protections for freelance workers, independent contractors. But the other big thing is that from the beginning, when this committee formed, we have always been intentional and talked about the importance of supporting the passage of ordinances that can be enforced. And like how do we effectively enforce them and ensure their enforcement? Because if we can't enforce it, then the laws is just a piece of paper if we don't have a way to really make sure that it's real, and really impacts people's lives as intended. So that has included getting updates, which Brian's going to give us a little later today, but getting updates and giving feedback on how enforcement is happening with the department or the division. Also ensuring that there's enough staff to implement and enforce the new standards that get passed, and ensuring that businesses, especially small businesses, and workers, especially Black and Brown workers who are making minimum wage, actually know the law and know how to apply it, whether because they need to apply it to their business model or because they need to know their rights to be able to say, hey, I deserve this right and I'm not getting it. So that's kind of the history of how this table has connected to it. And I am going to now try to share my screen. Let's see if this works. All right, looks like it's working. All right, so it's like impossible to really talk about enforcement models of any kind, including co-enforcement, without talking about the pervasiveness of wage theft. I'll try to be brief because I know a lot of folks know this, but I know folks, it's always helpful to have a reminder of like why we're doing this work. So, you know, the things that are, I think, important recognizing here are like the pervasiveness of it, how it impacts people, and specifically recognizing that it is a crisis that is disproportionately impacting Black and brown workers that are working in low wage jobs. So what is wage theft? This is a number of different ways that wage theft can look. It is just, generally speaking, an underpayment or failure to pay all the wages that are owed. It can be working off the clock, not getting overtime pay, unlawful deductions from paychecks, no payment at all, like where the boss disappears or just doesn't pay workers at all and says, I'll pay you later. So these are just a number of different ways that we see wage theft happen. Let's see. And so for the context of our co-enforcement model here with LSED is, LSED enforces the, sick and safe time and minimum wage. And so for workers that are not independent contractors, those are the two main areas that we're talking about here. All right. Wage theft is super prevalent and it's kind of hard to imagine. And I hear a lot of people say, but how do they get away with it? And the reality is because there's just nobody in there every day saying you have to do this. And so they just don't. Some employers just don't. So here I'll just name that there was a seminal study done. This was like the first big wage theft study in 2009 that found that in several major cities that found that 66% of low-wage workers had experienced wage theft within the previous week. So that's a lot, right? In Minneapolis, there's an estimated tens of millions, 600 million statewide that are stolen from the local economy, especially communities of color through wage. Black and Latinx workers are respectively greater than 3 and 4 times more likely than white workers to experience wage theft. So it's happening all over the place and people are just living it and often suffering it in silence. And what we want to do is break out of that so that there's actual compliance and people are getting paid their wages. This is an image, it's an old image from 2012, but I think it's just a good image to represent what's, still true today, is that the problem of wage theft is way, way bigger than the problem of like robbery or any kind of property theft. So you see here, this is like, it's 3 times worse. All right, who pays the price? Like we've said, workers, especially Black and brown workers that are making minimum wage or less. Taxpayers and the governments. When employers don't pay workers their wages, that means they're also not paying payroll tax. And that could mean that they're not paying a bunch of other things that then can make this, like could be insurance fraud, payroll fraud, like all of these things are like money that's not going to our government that should be. And high road businesses that are trying to do the right thing, but get undercut by businesses that don't care about doing the right thing and have, models that include wage theft just as a part of their business model. And I also want to say that specifically at CETUL and with our partner organizations, we fight back against these instances of wage theft by doing the outreach and the education and developing the leadership of workers to make sure that they can enforce their rights. And we've been doing it CETUL has been doing it for 15 years. And I just wanted to also talk about a couple stories to paint the picture a little bit more. So Emilio Miranda Rios is a member of CETUL. He came to CETUL when he was subcontracted as a janitor cleaning Home Depot when he wasn't paid for extra hours that he worked washing the windows. We sorted it out. Great. We were able to get Emilio paid. And then later, he and his wife came, hundreds of dollars stolen working at a motel. And then a couple years later, Emilio also had his wages stolen working at a convenience grocery store, where he was, this is just ridiculous. He was told that the Sundays he worked there were volunteer time, that because he is older, then they didn't have to pay him, and they just assumed that he was like an elderly guy who wanted to volunteer his time to help the store do his same job that he does every other day at the store. It's just unfathomable and clearly intentional, right? So he was able to recover his money because we went together and talked. He was able to negotiate getting his wages, but it's like this, the same guy, this is one guy, right? With all of these are just some of the examples of how he's had his wages. Another story is Marfa Malcolm, who's a member of SATUL as well. She was unable to recover thousands of dollars in stolen wages. And her employer actually held on to her passport and other important immigration documents because for safekeeping. And then when she asked for them back, because she was starting to realize they're a lot safer in my pocket, her employer started withholding her wages. So there's a lot to this story that obviously is going untold here. At the end of the day, she was able to get everything back. But what she didn't know was that her employer had used her signature fraudulently, saying that she had received the wages. At the end of the day, there's all kinds of stories like this that are like, some are straightforward, some are roundabout, some are very confusing. And part of why this co-enforcement model is important is because organizations that are in the community that are on the ground every day can have some expertise and knowledge to bring to the city about some specific employers and industries. And also, I mean, especially I know Madeline is looking at this and going, that sounds like one of the specific things that is in the category of labor trafficking when an employer is holding on to your documents. And it's unfortunately very true that we have uncovered a number of different trafficking situations over our years. And it is one of the most sort of, well, I guess one thing to say is that if we don't put systems in place that stop wage theft, then we end up with conditions that are really ripe for trafficking, that are ripe for just a really egregious workplace violations for workers. And we also then start to see employers taking calculated risks and deciding to base their business models on wage theft because the likelihood of getting caught violating a worker's rights is so small, and the consequences in the past have been even smaller. And so we have seen a number of employers be unscrupulous and decide on wage theft. In the work that SATUL has done in partnership with both the city of Minneapolis and the county, we have, like I said, uncovered some human trafficking cases. And I know that what we've seen just based on our conversations with workers, that it's just the tip of the iceberg. But I think everybody here has probably seen the Ricardo Batres case, where here in Hennepin County, with the first labor trafficking sentence in Hennepin County happened now a couple years back. And this was one of the cases that SATUL, in partnership with the carpenters and other building trades and with city officials, were able to uncover. And like I said, I know there's more. And where workers don't actually have a voice in any of the enforcement that's happening, then they just tend to not have rights. And we need workers involved in the conversation about how do we fix this problem. So that's where we come to co-enforcement, where we have workers and worker organizations in partnership with the city. So co-enforcement is a partnership between labor standards divisions or departments, depending on where we are, and community organizations who already engage regularly with workers that are the most impacted by the laws that the division or the department enforces. So, you know, here that's earn sick and safe time, that's the wage theft protections and the minimum wage. And locally, the groups that have been partnering with Minneapolis LSED are Setul Awud Center and ROC, the Restaurant Opportunity Center. And there are potentially others that could also engage in this kind of work. Okay, so why does co-enforcement matter rather than a traditional sort of, people come, they file a complaint with the city, and the community organizations in the city works separately to do different things? Why co-enforcement is helpful? These are like the 5 key things. One is that we can reach the most vulnerable populations. So co-enforcement ensures that outreach to the people who are most vulnerable to wage theft, who often don't feel comfortable connecting directly with government agencies, like we can actually reach out to them because organizations like Setul Awud and ROC are trusted entities in the communities and hold deep connections with vulnerable working communities that have been historically marginalized by structural racism. And we bring a deep knowledge of the industries and employers that are the worst violators of labor laws. Specifically, also just like understanding the tricks that employers use and how that differs from sector to sector, how they try to get around the law, how they try to trick people based on their knowledge of people. And organizations like ours are also uniquely equipped to support people in marginalized communities who often don't trust the government, and help them to be able to overcome the multiple barriers that exist to speaking out against a violation of their rights, which means language. It means fear about people's immigration status. It means fear of retaliation, which I'm not even going into, but is huge. The fear of retaliation that workers face, whether it's real or whether people have heard about it being real and are scared. And all of this kind of leads into, there can be trafficking situations that people don't want to come forward. So another piece is that when in the partnership, in reaching most vulnerable populations, in the partnership, organizations like ours, like the city's not just asking us to go hand out flyers and make announcements in a newspaper or on the radio. We could do that, but co-enforcement is a much deeper partnership, and it's a much deeper look at what does it really take for workers to speak up for their rights, to make sure their rights are respected. So we do leadership trainings with workers so that they can act to prevent wage theft, because just knowing the information of what the rights are is often not enough. And so we train workers, and then those workers train workers, and then those workers train workers, and they can come together to also help feel backed up, both by Setul and other organizations and just their coworkers, so that they can say, hey, you actually didn't raise the minimum wage on July 1st like you were supposed to, and none of us are getting paid what we should, for example. And another thing that may not seem like a huge thing, but it really is that when we're talking about the most vulnerable communities, we're also talking about communities that don't have a lot of stability. When you're working paycheck to paycheck and you're getting your wages stolen, you have to choose between paying for rent or paying for your phone, right? Or paying for food or paying for transportation. So that might mean you come and file a complaint with Brian Walsh, and then your phone is cut off for a month. That, if it were Brian Walsh alone, would be like, there's nothing you can do. But because I'm still in communication with that worker because I know their sister's phone number, I know where I can find them. Like, because we have those relationships, we can actually help make these cases possible, and get in contact with workers and find other workers or learn more information about the case. So that's an important piece in the reaching out to the most vulnerable populations. Here, actually, I forgot to click. She has most vulnerable populations. Yes, that's what I just wanted to do. And so, yeah, so just here are a couple of examples. At the McDonald's on East Lake Street, we had communication with actually this worker that you see here in the picture, Stephen Suffrage, who came to us and said, hey, they're not paying us what we're supposed to be getting paid. And then we were able to help him talk to his coworkers and bring together a number of people to collect information and partner with LSED investigators to bring information that helped to be able to win this $20,000 back pay for workers. And then this is just a picture of some of our leadership schools where workers are getting certified that they know their rights and that they know how to enforce their rights. Okay, racial equity. So again, this is some of the deeper leadership development that we've done, just some pictures of that. That you know, historically, the vast majority of workers that have come to the Labor Standards Enforcement Division to say, hey, I'm not getting paid, or hey, my rights are being violated, have been white. And many have actually been union members. On the flip side, the organizations that are in partnership with the city through this co-enforcement model are engaging, we are engaging communities of color primarily. And so what does that mean? It means that in the co-enforcement partnership model, the city is entering into contracts with community orgs, specifically in Black and Brown communities, in order to harness the power of the relationships we hold and like who we can reach out to and who we can get engaged. So this approach, by doing it this way, this approach actually centers racial equity to make sure that the investment that the city is making in outreach and education is actually going to the communities that most need it, to the Black and Brown communities in Minneapolis, to make sure that workers are receiving the benefits of the increased standards as we've been passing the laws. So 3 is more breadth and depth of information. So worker centers hold deep connections in communities and are really able to be the eyes and ears of enforcement on the ground where violations are taking place. So because we have the intimate knowledge of industries and the employers that are the most egregious violators, we can help, community partners are able to help investigators identify areas for more targeted and strategic enforcement. So like we have a lot of knowledge about like areas, industries that are high, that we know are high violation, but that are also low reporting because of fear and vulnerability and retaliation and all these other kinds of things. And we can also, in the midst of an investigation, well, obviously there are some things that are confidential that investigators cannot tell us. We can talk about information about the employer, how they're going to react, where to look for certain violations. We can look for more complainants that can provide more information when we know that something is a commonplace violation in a particular workplace or sector. And so this co-enforcement model means, it does mean investing in sufficient enforcement staff and investigators, but it also means using the resources that are available in the most efficient ways to maximize impact, which is in partnership with organizations. And so our goal isn't just to react to violations once they've happened, it's also to prevent violations from happening in the first place. So both the agency and the organizations can just are able to have a more effective use of their resources to ensure compliance. Another final thing in this area is of more breadth and depth of information is that we can partner in order to identify creative settlement terms. So like when the worker files a complaint and the investigators are, employers interested in a settlement, can look for settlement terms that can promote long-lasting compliance, that even include things that are not monetary settlements, like yes, people get their wages and there's potential damages, But we can look for settlement terms that lend themselves towards education for the employer or for workers, and or for enforcement. So some of this has included trainings that community partners have been able to provide for workers, and also different sort of tactics related to public relations and how to talk about what's happening publicly. Okay, so I said there were 5 key things. This is 3, 4. The fourth way that co-enforcement is critical, like what is good about co-enforcement is preventing wage theft and having proactive compliance. So, so what this has meant is that co-enforcement makes sure that there's a robust program for outreach and education around people's rights. And it also means when we do that, that we can actually take action to prevent wage theft before it happens, where in the same way that if an employer has a clear understanding of their responsibility, then they're better equipped to make the right decisions to comply with the law. Likewise, workers, when they know their rights and how to enforce them, then they're more empowered to speak up to their employers and correct problems without even having to initiate a formal complaint process. So I say this to say that I think part of the success of this model isn't even just getting lots of complaints and moving forward on them strategically, it's preventing wage theft before it happens, or it's being able to deal with wage theft before it has to take more escalated steps. So the, and we've seen that the combined efforts of the agency and community organizations can help us find, like I said before, the creative settlements that can help promote long-lasting compliance. But so I'll give a quick example. A Satul organizer met with a worker to discuss her working conditions, and she named that 3 workers, including herself, had to quarantine for COVID, and they were told that they could not use their accumulated sick hours, which we know is a violation of the law. So this woman came and participated in a set of trainings on her rights and how to speak up about her rights. And then she committed herself to talking to her coworkers and getting a meeting with the manager to say, hey, this is what happened and we need our money. And a week later, after follow-up from an organizer, they had met with the manager and they had been paid the outstanding sick time. And they have now told their other coworkers there, hey, if you need to quarantine, you get sick time. And now people there get their sick time when they quarantine. So that's also like the kind of work that community partners can do that is unique to help promote long-term compliance and make sure that workers are empowered. The fifth here is, leveling the playing field for employers. And I don't really have a ton that's more specific than that, just that, when some employers are doing the right thing and others aren't, they're at a competitive disadvantage, and we don't want that. We want our high road employers who are doing the right thing to not be penalized for that by being in competition with unscrupulous employers. So in summary, a couple of other lessons that come out of this, I sort of went through why enforcement matters, like what are the things where co-enforcement matters, what are the things that we're able to accomplish through co-enforcement. These are the other lessons that have come out. So one is that community contracts need to focus on the right organizations who have the right expertise and the right relationships. 2 is that community partners should not just be using resources for light touch information like flyering, but for deeper leadership development. 3 is that funding should ensure a 1-to-1 ratio of investigator to $100,000 in community contracts. So this is something we learned coming out of Seattle that was a key in their model, was to keep that ratio solid, where you've got, so if we've got 5 investigators, that we have $500,000 in community contracts, and that ratio helps ensure the best, most effective possible outcomes. Finally, that it is it is very advantageous for one community partner to act sort of like a hub organization through which money can flow and can subcontract out some of the outreach and education to other organizations that also meet the criteria above. And the reason for this is that then activities can be coordinated in a way for maximum impact rather than just giving some money here, some money there. People are kind of all over the place doing their own thing. So those are the other lessons that that we've learned through doing the co-enforcement work and why it's been powerful here. So with that, I will unshare, I think. Let's see if I can figure out how to do that. Okay, I think I'm back. Yes. All right. So do people have any questions? I was hoping to be pretty thorough, but I know I just talked a lot at you. So yeah, do people have questions or reactions or thoughts?
One thing that I think, you know, when we've talked to workers, that a big frustration is always that they just want to be able to go one place and talk to one person, and that one person will be able to tell them sort of all their options. And, you know, Satul handles a whole bunch of stuff, but I don't know that you guys want to be the like universal 1-800-HELP worker hotline either. So what do you, I mean, and I think, you know, government agencies wish they were the 1-800-HELP worker hotline, but we know that's not something that they can do. Is there room in a co-enforcement model for that kind of like sort of one-stop shop?
I think, yeah, I mean, that's something that I've thought about for sure and like have heard come up, and it is hard. I will be honest and say, like, I don't know that it's possible. I guess there's some, it's just, I think the difficulty is that it's bringing together different sets of expertise. Because it's like, Brian, you know, just to use these concrete examples, like Brian needs to do what Brian does. Like Brian knows the law, Brian knows precedents, Brian knows how to do that. And, you know, and investigators really, like that's the work that they do. And they're experts on it. They know how the communication is going to work. They know what to expect. I don't know all of those details. I know some of it. But what I know and what our organizers know is like how to relate to people in the industry because we're operating in that industry. So I you know, and hold those relationships and be able to stand with people who are afraid of being retaliated against. So I just don't know that you could bring all of the sets of expertise into one. But I think what has been helpful for us is trying to make sure that, especially when situations are really difficult, and especially like thinking about a trafficking situation, where there is one person that will be by your side everywhere you go, in as much as they're allowed to be there, but like that is going to help you make meaning out of everything that's happened, going to help you find the resources, even if they don't have them. That is something I think is really important. It is something that community organizations can provide, especially in like big or tricky or like just more intense cases.
Thanks, Veronica. This is Elise.
Veronica, but thank you.
I was going to say the same thing. Great presentation, really helpful information, and like the specific examples, you know, of how those play out in terms of how CTOL or others work specifically with someone and what that scenario was, right? So why are they headed over to CTOL versus they're calling Brian, to the question you just sort of answered before, and sort of walking through the funding, you know, how it works process by process, because you're right, there is this sort of how to educate people, what their rights are, how to bring it up, how to find them, how to talk to them, all of that, versus Brian and the city's role is truly in that investigation and making sure it's following a legal process and, you know, and going through the right channels. It was interesting you called out the Seattle 1-to-1 ratio and sort of how they're managing that route. I don't know offhand, I guess, Brian or Veronica, do you know where we're at for that sort of investigator at the city versus funding ratio now? Is Minneapolis close to Seattle, or are we different?
I think we are close to Seattle in terms of ratio because we do have 4 investigators right now.
There's 5 total FTEs. 3 of us are investigators.
Okay, so 3 investigators, 5 FTEs, and we have 369,000 in community contracts. So the ratio is not far off. The amount of money is incredibly different. Seattle has like 23 million in community contracts and like 23-ish. I don't know the exact numbers right now, but it's way bigger. But ratio is close.
And I would agree, Veronica. I think we're getting the ratio and the mix pretty good, as you just illustrated. And I would also agree that the overall capacity and the overall investment is maybe not horrible, but definitely some room, some opportunity to do even better. And a way I've been thinking about it recently is because over the years, various stakeholders have sort of asked me, well, like, how much money do you need? And it's sort of like, well, you get what you pay for, but that's not really that's not a super helpful answer. And recently I've been thinking about just looking across other city departments to sort of give context. And so, for example, like the city has decades of experience enforcing, different business licensing requirements or food safety and environmental health requirements. So I think it's helpful to look at the health department has several dozen health inspectors that go across the city that visit all the restaurants and look at food safety things, or I think right now around a dozen business licensing inspectors. And all, both of those functions roughly, covering roughly this or regulating this the same or similar or maybe even fewer businesses than we do in labor standards. And when you compare that to the team in labor standards enforcement, where you have 3 investigators, it's 10,000 businesses and which always fluctuates, and 300,000 workers is a lot of ground to cover with 3 investigators and 300 some thousand in co-enforcement dollars.
Brian, that was going to be my question. That was exactly sort of because comparatively of cities our size, and you just said it, 10,000 businesses, which of course does fluctuate. And we saw that during COVID, especially, right? And even coming out of COVID and where we're at now for just business health and whatever, and workers and working through that. And some are coming back and some are not, right? So these numbers are fluctuating, but sort of comparatively. And that's what, when we had this discussion before and talking about the budget, I kind of wanted to understand that more because both sides are important, right? You need to have the community side to really reach those folks who aren't getting the information and have that outlet, right? But you also have to have the true, the city can go to that business, walk in the front door as a city investigator or an entity and say, this is the law, right? You have to have both sides as part of enforcement. So that's why I was asking about the ratio and just how Minneapolis compares to sort of similar sized cities. And to be fair, I do think probably maybe numbers are a little, I don't know what they are coming out of COVID, because it's just a very different labor market, business market, all of it, but still important, right? Going forward, particularly now, given some of the strain on workers and business as a whole. So the education piece is just critical. So it would be curious to sort of compare ourselves to other cities and where we're at, and if we're not quite meeting, where we should be. But
I also think that, when you don't have enough people to do the work, we're not capturing everything. And so it's that horrible circle where, well, show me you need us. Well, we need you to be able to show, we need people to be able to show you, you know what I mean? It's this horrible circle for you guys to, so I appreciate the conversation and the presentation. I've learned a lot.
Any other questions about the model in general or about how things are happening here specifically?
Well, Veronica, I would just like to lift up and kind of reiterate one of the things that you said it's kind of like there's different levels or different kinds of enforcement, and all of it really is enforcement. You know, what we're doing at the city, a very like strict legal process, is one end of sort of enforcement, but also like the work of co-enforcement, and which does definitely help the enforcement that we do at the city in terms of being sort of a liaison with workers in particular investigations, or pointing us towards certain industries or even certain employers, etc. But also the work of the training and capacity building in groups of workers and in individual workers is so impactful, because it allows workers to empowers workers to enforce their own rights in ways like, for example, if my check was short, like I probably wouldn't file a complaint. Like I would march into my bosses, or depending, but I would march into HR, march into my boss's office, whatever, and be like, there's a problem here. And I would like make sure that I would get it fixed. That is also in enforcement, and the co-enforcement model really invests in that. And then also when that doesn't work, there's another level up where a worker center can sort of accompany the worker and say, hey, there's a problem here. And oftentimes that resolves the issue. In either one of those scenarios, that worker or that group of workers either advocating for him or her or themselves, or accompanied by, say, Tool or another worker center to sort of do that, either liaison or advocacy. None of that then has to be reported to the city and elevated to an entire whole legal process that probably wasn't necessary in the first place. So it really saves the city a lot of money, because we didn't have to now, there's some compliance or enforcement issue that was resolved without the city having to invest precious resources. And those sort of less formal, less extreme measures are probably they're probably more appropriate to that particular problem, and probably do a better job in preserving the employee-employer relationship. So anyway, I think all of that often gets kind of lost in the but you did a great you did a great job of lifting all that up, Veronica. So I appreciate it. All right. Anyone else have any final thoughts on that before we move on? All right. Thank you, May. Okay, it's 5 o'clock. You know what we did have, Veronica? There's another thing on another item on our agenda. I'm curious if you have talked to Janice Fine, and if not, we can move it to our agenda next month. Rutgers University and the Main Street Alliance is sort of looking at a pilot project in Minneapolis to really look at barriers to compliance for really small businesses. I'm curious, Veronica, if you've heard anything new about that in the last month.
Yeah, the little bit that's new is that this week, this week, there's going to be a convening of business owners from East Lake Street, both folks who had small businesses and are now trying to get them back, and folks who are ongoing still running their businesses, with Janice Fine and Rutgers University and folks to do like a focus group to learn from them, like what are some of the biggest barriers, both in this circumstance with the moment, right, of trying to rebuild after the uprisings, but also just generally what are their obstacles to doing compliance the way we would like to see them doing compliance.
That's great. That sounds really exciting. Maybe we will, maybe I'll reach out to Janice Fine to see if she wants to come visit this committee at some point in the next few months, and just kind of give a check-in or an overview of what that project is all about and how the progress is coming. All right. Well, it is 5 o'clock. This committee is scheduled till 5:30. The only other item we have on the agenda is for me to touch on the annual report. we just went through a great presentation and a lot of discussion, so I'm not going to take up too much time, but I think we do still have time, so I'm going to share my screen, and I will just give, let's see here, some highlights. So this is the annual report that is required by ordinance to give to present yearly to the city council. So I'm going to do that at the March 30th meeting of the Public Health and Safety Committee. So you all, if you have any feedback at all from me about this report or any questions, we can take those now or offline. I'm not going to go through every single slide because it's a lot, and we already had a presentation at this meeting. But I'll just hit on some high points. And also, before I do that, let me just show you this. A lot of this data lives on the city's website and is updated on I think it's a weekly basis. Might even be more than that. And you can access it either by going to the city's homepage. Whoops. That's not what I wanted. Let me do that again. The city's homepage is right here, and if you scroll down towards the bottom, this data source, visualizations, and dashboards, if you go in here and search labor standards, you'll find the data that I'm about. You'll find the dashboard with all of the labor standards enforcement data. So in other words, you don't need to wait for the annual report. There's always a lot of good information in there, and certainly it's a great source of information. The other way to access that data is, was I just there? This is the Labor Standards Enforcement Division page. So if you navigate to the Department of Civil Rights and then click on the division, you can also find the information right here. This is what the dashboard looks like. And there's a lot. For example, if you click in here to closed investigations, and then you click across the top here, there's just a lot of data that breaks down what we're doing, how many investigations, you know, we have open or closed, what the outcomes have been, for example, here in aggregate, and then also by different ordinance types, etc. Wanted to point that out before I give you a quick overview from 2021, because a lot of this data you'll find in that dashboard. I'm going to skip through a bunch of slides. This just highlights the ordinances that we enforce, kind of what they are, etc. I'm going to make a couple of, just a handful of main points. We did hire an extra, not an extra, our fifth FTE at what joined us midway through 2021. We have a third investigator now, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, and that has really helped with capacity. It's starting to turn the corner into having more capacity to do more of that proactive rather than just reacting to complaints as they come in the door. This outreach really jumped in 2021. A lot of it was actually going sort of business to business. So it's not, some of the previous years was more kind of broad communications and broad outreach. Some of that continued in 2021, but we were able to do a lot of outreach directly to different businesses and looking more proactively. The next couple slides just highlight sort of the outreach and education to businesses that we also really try to do. We get a lot of businesses contacting us, basically saying, hey, are we in compliance? And we really, really appreciate that. There's a lot of it that we do. Mostly we are contacted by email, certainly by phone call as well. This breaks down sort of by year and by question type. A lot of the questions are oftentimes about the sick and safe time ordinance, because probably that is a little bit more complicated of a concept than some of the other things, and a more of a newer concept than some of the other things that we do, more general wage hour law type of rules that have been around for a really long time. This just shows how much web traffic we get, and this is really where a lot of our outreach and education to businesses occurs. We do a lot of work and work really hard to update and maintain as helpful and as many tools on our websites so that people, employees, and certainly business owners can come in to click into our websites and find the information that they need. You can see there are tens of thousands of visits per year. This is new investigations filed by year. You can see 2021 ticked back up following the pandemic. And I also think, again, the addition of that third investigator really has an impact in the number of investigations that we're able to receive and then also kind of look into proactively. This shows you these are the investigations filed and what types of complaints are being filed with us. And what I point out here is the left side of the screen or the left side of the slide or all the different kinds of sick and safe time allegations. And the important thing to note here is just that the sick and safe time allegations really do outnumber historically and that continued in 2021 compared to wage theft, minimum wage, and other types of allegations that we receive. Although in 2021, we did receive many more wage theft, other types of wage hour complaints and allegations than in previous years. So that's also important to note. By industry, we get a lot of, I know stakeholders always want to know, and we get a lot of questions about where we see violations. And what I'll point out on this slide is that in previous years, accommodation and food services, so basically restaurants, really dominated compared to other industries as far as being a high rate of violation industry. And we spent a lot of time in restaurants and accommodation food services looking specifically at the sick and safe time ordinance. In the lower left, the lower left of those pie charts is 2021, and we spent comparatively much less time in restaurants, perhaps in part due, I think, to the pandemic, but also I think maybe a comparatively better job in the restaurant industry and some other industries that we're turning towards to pay more attention to. This shows that the outcomes of our investigations, and the settlements are the kind of purple bar. 2021 is at the bottom there. And I always look for settlements being a bigger number, or settlements compared to unsubstantiated. Those are the two bars where we're really spending a lot of time in the investigation. And you can see that there were more settlements than there were unsubstantiated claims that were fully investigated in 2021. This is a good summary of really the overall result of all the investigations for the year. Dollars collected, up over $100,000 in collected, and that's all going directly back to workers in 2021, ticking up compared to 2020 that we're sort of recovering from the pandemic, where large portions of the economy were kind of shut down, especially restaurants, and added that third investigator. You can also see wage theft recoveries in 2021, where in previous years you really did not see that. And then workers directly affected, the right side of the slide. In 2021, over 1,000 workers that received or had their rights enforced that would not have occurred but for the investigation of our division. And again, 2021, much larger number than 2020 as we move out of the pandemic. I think that's enough for today, and that's just about to the end of the presentation. Let me stop sharing. We have come towards the end of our agenda, but before we close out the meeting, does anyone have any questions about that presentation? We can also review different pieces of it and discuss it in future meetings. Thanks, Sarah. Okay. Well, does anyone else have anything for the good of the group before we dismiss the meeting and look towards next month? Going once? Going twice? Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for being here. Have a great night and see you next month.
Thanks,
Thank
Brett.
you. See you all later.